in the high desert in the great American Southwest.
Welcome to Coast AM. John, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us. You're with us.
Welcome to Coast PM, the number one unofficial Coast to Coast AM podcast. This is a podcast where two brothers analyze the world's largest overnight paranormal radio show known as Coast to Coast AM. My name is Paul, and I'm the guy that listens to this inexplicable radio show here with my brother.
Hey, it's Chris. I'm the Billy Crystal to your Meg Ryan, but I didn't create one of the cutest romantic comedies on the planet.
You did not, Chris, but you did co-create one of the best paranormal radio or podcasts, I think, that is out there currently.
Dedicated to Coast AM.
Dedicated to Coast to Coast AM. It's early. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, it's good. It's good.
But today, Chris, we have another episode.
Yes, Paul. We all realize that when we start recording. Thank you.
You are welcome. And today's episode is going to be all about Mothman. Mothman.
What is this? Some kind of turkey that dresses up like a moth?
It's a giant moth-shaped man / humanoid flying creature that has been terrorizing the citizens of West Virginia for decades, if not centuries.
So it's worse than Black Lung.
Yes, okay, substantially. Perfect. I would rate this number one issue to West Virginia. Number two issue is the Black Lung from the coal mines.
Yeah, the Black Lung and the addiction to painkillers.
Yes, most definitely. So this is going to be Art Bell's. This is going to be Art Bell's interview with John Keel about the Mothman prophecies that aired on January 24th, 2002.
It's been a while since I denigrated a state, so I felt I just needed to throw a little something in there.
You got to blast West Virginia a little bit.
Just blasting West Virginia. Your state is fake, West Virginia.
Yeah. I wonder if we have any West Virginia listeners. If you're in West Virginia, write in. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, give us a shout out. Tell us about the Mothman.
Yeah. But before we get to that, Chris.
Tim time.
We got to go check out the Coast to Coast AM blog with Tim Binnall. So this week's article, Flat Earther fights physicist at Kent State.
Wait, like physically fights?
Physically fought.
They physically fought?
A flat earther and a physicist got into a brawl at Kent State. Yes.
I can't wait to hear about this.
It's a good one. And if you have not checked out our Flat Earth episode with David Weiss, that's episode 12. Go check that out. Probably give you a little bit of context here.
Is this David Weiss?
It's not David Weiss. It's someone else.
Oh, okay.
But it's all there in terms of the philosophy behind Flat Earth. It's all the same stuff.
Right.
All right. So reading from Tim's article, cops at Kent State University in Ohio were called upon to break up a bizarre brawl that erupted between a flat earth enthusiast and a scientist who took issue with the controversial conspiracy theory.
I would just like to change that to rent a cop at Kent State, please.
Okay, rent a cop at Kent State.
Thank you.
The very strange incident reportedly occurred this past Tuesday when Peter Harvio arrived on campus with a sizable display, which argued that the moon landings were a hoax, and in fact, our planet is not round. Stationed outside of a university building, the conspiracy theorist spoke to several students about his unique ideas until he caught the attention of one particular passerby who had his own passionate feelings about the subject.
So wait, he wasn't even like giving a talk. He's just one of these like street criers.
What world would Kent State have a flat earther give a talk?
I don't know. I mean, I just figure, people give talks in different ways. This dude is just on the side of the street talking about flat earth.
This guy showed up on campus with a giant poster board and started yelling about flat earth.
Fascinating.
We had one of these guys at my university. He thought the world was going to end and he had a countdown.
Yeah, dude. They all colleges have a street preacher.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I don't see the evangelist for flat earth coming to college campuses that often.
I want to see more of it because it sounds really funny.
Give me more. Okay, let's go.
All right. So according to police, the unnamed man approached Harvio and the two had a heated conversation about the concepts that he was promoting. Unfortunately, what could have been a constructive exchange of ideas quickly turned ugly when the angry skeptic apparently gave up on trying to sway the conspiracy theorist's opinion and instead decided to focus his frustration on the flat earthers display. Harvio later told police the man, quote, took my posters and threw them. In response, the conspiracy theorist grabbed the irate man and the two tumbled to the ground where they began grappling.
Fisticuffs?
Fisticuffs.
My goodness.
So, recalling the brawl to the police, Harvio said that, quote, I straddled him full guard, I think they call it in MMA. And in the kind of unorthodox fighting technique one might expect from a flat earther, quote, I pulled his glasses off because I figured he needed his glasses.
Oh, yes.
Which, not a bad move.
You that? I was going to say, did they teach you that in MMA too?
Depending on
remove his glasses.
Depending on how blind this guy is, he may need those to fight.
Yeah, especially if he's farsighted.
Yeah.
May not be able to see anything up close.
So, alerted to the situation by concerned witnesses, rent-a-cops arrived on the scene and promptly put an end to the skirmish. When asked why he had to trash Harvio's display, the man explained that he was, quote, upset by this theory because he is a physicist and the earth is not flat. In turn,
wow, you don't see physicists getting that upset after fake theories.
Yeah, this guy was in a mood about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say this guy is one of these people that says they believe in science.
Oh yeah. So in turn, officers informed him that the consternation did not give him the right to throw the posters, which were Harvio's property.
Ooh, rent-a-cops coming to the aid of flat earth.
Coming in spicy. So neither men were arrested and they both went their separate ways. And then Harvio returned to his spot with his poster board and continued to preach the good news of flat earth.
So pretty much what we've learned today is don't send your children to Kent State.
Don't send your children to Kent State.
Because
they'll get into fistfights.
Even the physicists are jabronis.
I just love that a physicist was like, I'm throwing down with this guy.
I am so upset right now by flat earth theory that I'm going to get into a fight.
Now, in his defense, flat earthers are really frustrating.
Why would you ever even speak to one, though? I was upset enough at David Weiss just listening to him. I wasn't even directly interacting with the man. Like I said, dude, flat earthers are just frustrating human beings who are just so internet brained. They can't form connections, actual connections anymore. So why would you waste your time? And that's what I'm saying, dude. This physicist is I believe science person who is just as frustrating as flat earthers.
I think they're very different in terms of frustration, but I will say that he also committed the original sin of conspiracy theory, according to George Noory, which is saying that we didn't go to the moon.
Oh,
never say we didn't go to the moon. That is a coast to coast
sin.
AM sin.
Yeah, don't do that. What did Art think about that?
Art believed we went to the moon for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he did have an episode on moon landing hoaxes that we can talk through, but yeah, he wasn't on the moon hoax
particularly game. Yeah, he would allow it to happen, but he wasn't pro we didn't go to the moon.
Oh, he would talk about pretty much anything. I mean, he brought a satanic witch on to talk about how she has sex with young virgins in Salt Lake City.
That's Harlot the Witch, everyone, if you haven't listened to it yet.
Yep, go check that one out. Some housekeeping. We have an email address. Send your thoughts or episode requests to c2cpmpod@gmail.com. That is with the number 2. We'll drop that in the show notes. If you like the show, give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and smash that subscribe button. We release an episode every Thursday, and that'll make sure you never miss a show. And thank you to everyone that's told friends about us or written in with show requests or general good vibes. We really appreciate you.
This is an artisanal podcast. Homemade, baby.
Homemade, dude. 100% organic as well.
Yeah, dude. USDA certified.
Very true. Well, to today's episode, Chris. Art Bell's interview with John Keel on January 24th, 2002. Now, Chris, are you familiar with John Keel or Mothman?
I am somewhat familiar about Mothman, but merely because I watched the Richard Gere classic, Mothman Prophecies, Paul.
That is fair. Well, today we're going to be hearing from the guy that Richard Gere plays in that movie. John
No
Keel.
way.
Yes.
That's who he's playing?
That's who he's playing. This guy.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So John Keel was a journalist and author. He passed away in 2009 at the age of 79. He wrote a book called The Mothman Prophecies that described his investigation into the sightings of a large winged creature in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The book was later turned into the 2002 film starring Richard Gere that you mentioned, Chris, which is also called Mothman Prophecies.
Hence why Art is interviewing him in 2002. It's for the movie, probably.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
He was going on his little, radio and TV appearances and all that stuff for this movie specifically.
What again, dude? You got to go to coast, baby. Got to.
This is your audience. If you're the Mothman guy,
Prophecies, you really got to juice these numbers up, dude.
Yeah.
Turnout is key in this demographic.
Oh yeah, this is who goes to see that movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Keel's also the reason why Mothman is a thing. Like he literally wrote the book that made Mothman famous.
Right. He is the grandfather of the Mothman conspiracy.
Now, but at the time, Art didn't really know anything about Mothman. So that's the first thing we got to address. Like, what is Mothman?
And Paul, I'm sorry, when did he write the book again?
He wrote the book in 1975.
1975. So it's been 25 years. And Art is still not super up to date on Mothman.
Because Mothman also is an artisanal cryptid as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Hills of West Virginia, dude. Who's going there?
It's very localized.
Everyone's leaving West Virginia. And nobody's coming to West Virginia.
I think West Virginia will actually give you like $15,000 if you move there. They have an incentive.
Yeah, they're
package.
like Alaska. They're like Alaska.
They're like, please come, please.
Please, God, come here.
Yep. So Art Bell's first question to John is, hey, what is Mothman? What's going on with this thing?
The only thing I've known about Mothman was an occasional caller who would reference Mothman. And I'd always say, well, I don't know a lot about it. And your name would come up. And so anyway, here we are finally. What is Mothman?
Well, it all began about 35 years ago. So that's, in terms of generations, that's like 3 generations and by modern standards, It's easy to forget it. Mothman appeared in West Virginia in 1966. And there were frequent appearances of this creature, which was described as being about 7 or 8 feet tall, which is pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
And had very bright red eyes.
Bad.
And it would spread wings that were about 10 feet across. And it would take off straight up in the air. And it had a curious habit of chasing automobiles.
Paul, a little misinformation right at the front. 35 years, I'm sorry, is not 3 generations.
It was a weird take.
A generation is 20 years. Even in the modern era, a generation is 20 years.
Yeah.
What the hell is this man talking about? It's been like 10 generations since I started talking about this, Art.
There have been like 80 generations.
So many generations have happened. You know how many times the moon has gone around the earth since I started talking about this?
So we got a Mothman in West Virginia, though, right?
Okay,
That's where we're at. Giant winged creature shoots up straight into the air, doesn't go diagonal like a normal bird. It's like just like whoosh, like Superman flying up.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. I like that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, a lot of the thinking is that this was a like jet propelled man, right?
I did not run into jet propulsion man theories.
Okay. That's what I think I remember seeing that somewhere, that somebody thought that it was like the U.S. Army testing early instances of jetpack.
That would be really funny with some of these sightings where like some dude with a jetpack was just like landing on a fire station and just like hanging out. That would be pretty funny. We'll talk through the sightings though in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So this Mothman was showing up starting in like 1966, 1967. And that was around the time that John Keel was there. And it was just scaring the crap out of people, dude.
Anyone who saw this was usually horrified and terrified and traumatized by it. And I, over a period of a year, I collected over 100 reports from people who seemed very sincere and very, very frightened by what had happened to them. This thing had sort of hypnotic powers that people would be transfixed when they saw it.
So is this guy like a journalist?
This guy is a journalist. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he's going out and starts collecting case studies in the late 60s, early 70s.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And the big thing is that he's in the region. We'll talk through why he's in the region in right after this clip. But he's there. He's seeing all these Mothman sightings as well as some other weird things that are happening. Right. So people are seeing Mothman a lot. They're seeing orbs down by the river. And he's basically just like writing all this stuff down and trying to figure out what's going on. And then the climax of all of these sightings is the bridge in town collapses.
Right.
The year climaxed with the collapse of a bridge with a lot of people on it.
What did that have to do with Mothman?
Well, it seemed to bring things to not to a stop, but everything slowed down. There were a lot of people on the bridge who had either encountered the Mothman or had close relatives who had encountered the Mothman.
What were all these people doing on the bridge?
They were driving, so it was around Christmas time. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a lot of people on a bridge, and right after the bridge collapses, the Mothman sightings stop.
Did a bunch of people die?
Yeah, around let me pull it up. Hold on. The Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15th, 1967, and 46 people died.
46 people?
46 people died, yeah.
That's got to be one of the worst bridge collapses in U.S. history.
Yeah, it made national news. Actually, It might have been international news, to be honest.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was, especially in America, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Especially at the time, we didn't have infrastructure problems.
We did not really. That was when we knew how to build things.
Right,
I think we've forgotten how to build things since then.
Definitely, dude. And actually, it's kind of surprising we don't have more bridge collapses.
Well, I mean, even with the bridge that was connecting Arkansas and Tennessee had that huge crack in it that they found. They're lucky that didn't break.
That it didn't end up a lot worse than it was. Right.
Yeah. Honestly.
Was there any Mothman activity around there, Paul?
There was in Arkansas.
In Arkansas,
there could have been. I did not look into that specific.
Didn't look into the connection between that, huh?
No, but we will look into connections of Mothman with some other large incidents later, Chris.
Okay, got it.
We will get there.
All right.
Now, like I said, John Keel, journalist. What's he doing in West Virginia, right?
Yeah, what's he doing there?
Pretty funny story.
And I had gone to Beckley, West Virginia, which is sort of a mining town then. I don't know what it is now.
What had taken you there? Why were you going there?
Because there was a boy there who had found a cat with wings.
A cat with wings?
Yes. And this cat was named, he named it Thomas, and it became a celebrity. And he charged 10 cents to look at this cat. So all of the people in the area were paying 10 cents to take a look at this winged cat.
Well, I'd sure pay 10 cents.
Dude, did you look into that?
Yeah. So what this was is that John Keel's job was just working for random publications and looking into weird stuff.
I was going to say, this seems like he's working for the National Enquirer or something like that. Like, boy finds winged cat, sells 10 cents. Like, I think I've seen that standing in line at the supermarket.
Yeah, that's what he was doing. That was his job. So it was random publications. At one point, he did work for Playboy, who hired him to look into the UFO phenomenon and really get to the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah.
He was not able to do, sadly.
He didn't get to the bottom of it, did he?
He did not figure out why we have UFOs. That would have been cool if he did. Would have been
I want to know more about this winged cat, Paul, though.
So he goes to investigate the winged cat, and it's only supposed to be in town for a couple hours. And when he goes to see the cat, the wings fall off, and it turned out that it was just like some tar and some gunk that this kid had pasted onto the back of a cat.
Yes.
And then was charging people 10 cents for it.
What, dude? He's a Barnum and Bailey in the making, dude.
Dude, it was 1960s Carney level stuff was what was going on here.
This is a Carney boy for sure. And West Virginia, those people will fall for anything, dude.
And the best part is there was a woman in town who sued the kid and said the cat was hers. And then the moment the wings fall off, she drops the suit. She's like, I don't want the cat anymore.
Wow.
She only did the lawsuit because she thought the cat was real.
That ain't real wings? Never mind.
You can keep it.
I don't want that cat.
So that's what brought him to the region, right? He was looking into a winged cat that turned out to be fraudulent. And then he just heard about all this crazy stuff that was happening, all these sightings that were occurring in the area.
Dude, so this guy is already kind of a madman.
He's wild. He's ready. He was in the right place at the right time for this.
Right.
Anyway, I went to Point Pleasant expecting to stay there for a few hours.
Sure.
Interviewing these people.
Sure.
And I discovered that there were all sorts of things happening there. They were seeing UFOs. When I say UFOs, these were very, very bright lights.
Okay.
And they were going up and down the river. And everybody was seeing them. And nobody knew what they were. And very often they would be very, very low in the sky. They'd be like 100 feet above the water.
And in size, how big?
Well, they were mostly the size of a large beach ball. Well, these things seem to have a basic intelligence to them. If you flashed a flashlight at them, they jump out of the way of the beam.
I've heard those stories, yes.
And also, I would flash, say, 3 times, and they would flash back 3 times.
Oh.
And I did this in front of witnesses who signed affidavits.
Whoa, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, so just wild stuff being seen everywhere.
Interactive lights, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, but I mean, kind of to be fair, though, West Virginia does seem like a particularly creepy place.
And especially this location, I think, is extra creepy.
Yeah, dude. It's just like old mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Appalachians are already weird. And in West Virginia, you're kind of in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, and as some background on the region too, so Point Pleasant, West Virginia is in kind of the northern western part of West Virginia, and it's at the connection point between the Ohio River and the Kanawha River, right? So it's where these two locations meet. And during World War II, it was also where munitions was made. So they had old TNT factories, old munition depots all throughout this mountain, this area. So you got a lot of abandoned buildings on top of this like really fertile farmland.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And probably some old Department of Defense connections and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah, and you have a bunch of West Virginians in a small town. So the town's about 4,000 to 5,000 total people. So my assumption is also everyone's really bored and probably see stuff all the time.
Right.
Yeah. So the Mothman sightings start, and everyone's saying like this winged creature with red eyes is flying around the town.
The one distinctive thing about Mothman seems to be the description of blood red eyes, right?
Right. And that's a description also of Bigfoot very often.
Yeah. You know how some people hate snakes and some people are scared of spiders?
Right.
I'm scared of things with red eyes. I don't like red eyes. And somebody earlier was saying, well, you know, a lot of people have described things like Mothman as angels. And I said earlier, and I'll say again, angels definitely don't have red eyes.
That's true. Maybe the Archons have red eyes, but not angels.
Not angels. Red eyes are bad.
Right.
So in terms of the sightings, Chris, I wrote up a few case studies for you.
Okay.
That I want to get your opinion on.
Yes, let's do it. Dude, you know I love my case studies.
Yeah, so these sightings didn't really start until the 1960s, although sightings of large giant birds can be traced back all the way to 1914 in West Virginia.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it goes way back. So in 1967, these reportings started in earnest when 2 young couples were driving in a car and told police that they had been chased by a giant flying creature with 10-foot wings whose eyes glowed red.
Whoa.
So the local newspaper ran a headline saying, quote, "Couples see man-sized bird, ... creature, ... something."
Very fascinating, dude. Very fascinating. And you said what year that was? What
this
year
was
that?
1967.
1967. That's the first in the newspaper recorded case of Mothman.
Yes. And then a few days later, 2 volunteer firemen said that they saw a giant bird with red eyes perched on top of the fire station that flew away.
Weird. I mean, what could this have possibly been?
That's the thing.
Any speculation?
So there's a few pieces of speculation. I believe it was the sheriff at the time said that it was likely a large heron that was being spotted flying around. There is another local story, Chris, that will take us back to the 1770s that locals blamed at the time for this.
Okay, 1770s. Holy cow. Okay.
Yeah. So in the 1770s, the Shawnee were at war with colonists in the area, and the primary war chief for the Shawnee was Chief Cornstalk, who led Native American tribes against colonists, the most famous battle being the Battle of Point Pleasant, which occurred right where the town is located today.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see where you're going with this one.
So Chief Cornstalk made a diplomatic visit with his 3 sons to Fort Randolph, which was located in West Virginia in 1777. At the time, Fort Randolph was actually in Virginia. This was before West Virginia was a thing. And instead of treating with them, the colonists imprisoned the 4 Native Americans and eventually murdered them.
Right. Classic, dude. Classic colonial making of war.
Yes, they came to meet, and then they were all murdered.
They came for peace, and they were slaughtered.
Yes. So it was said that with his last dying breath, he cursed the land for 200 years.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
A note on this story, it comes from a 1901 play about the history of the region that was written entirely by white people. Native Americans have said that the story is just a way of blaming all of the issues in the area on them.
Right.
Which, very fair.
No, dude, I will say this. West Virginia is cursed. For sure.
It's definitely cursed. I'm not going to say it was Cornstalk who did it, but
I don't know if it was this Native American chief, but like it's a cursed state for sure.
It's fair. So
I mean, look at dude, just the mountaintop removal by itself. That's cursed, dude. But see, I think it's Moloch and not the chief. The Shoshone chief.
Yes. So that was what was one of the theories on top of the heron, was that it was this Native American curse, which also, stop blaming Native Americans for everything spooky that you see. I mean, going back to the Hinsdale House episode, dude found like a arrowhead and was like, it must be a burial ground. It's like, no, that's not what that means.
Yeah, but I do like the idea that Native Americans just have such a strong connection to the land that we don't, that they can get spirits to help them, and like the spirits remain, and this is just like some kind of like Native American protection spirit. Like, what was it, the Weebolo or whatever?
I forget the name of it, but yeah, the protection spirit that watched over
Hinsdale House.
The Hinsdale House. Yeah. So those are some of the ideas that were being thrown out. There was another story. There's a man named Newell Partridge who saw glowing red orbs late one night in the fields outside of his house. It was like very misty and spooky. And then these red orbs were just like flying around in circles. And then his dog ran towards the orbs and disappeared in the darkness and was never seen from again.
Do we know anything about these orbs? Anything more?
We do not. They were spotted a lot. It's kind of like spook lights, which we discussed at High Strangeness in the Desert episode. But basically, people are just spotting them all over the place.
Well, and again, we talked about it in that episode. But there's like so much like coal and natural gas and a lot of these weird things. Mist in mountains behaves weirdly, so you can kind of see where like you get this mix of weird stuff. And being in the mountains, in the hills of Appalachia, dude, is just creepy in general. So anyways, okay, let's get to some more.
All right. So overall, John Keel collected about 100 reported sightings of Mothman by locals within that year.
That's pretty impressive.
So it was all over the place. A lot of them happened in what was known as the TNT area. It was the region that had all the defunct weapons factories and storage depots for World War II.
Got it. That's interesting.
My favorite part about this was that as all these newspaper articles were coming out with all these sightings of Mothman, people started asking the government if they were allowed to shoot Mothman or if they were allowed to shoot Mothmen if it turned out that there were multiple of them. And the National Guard actually had to step in and limit who could come into the TNT area because so many people were trying to go in to shoot this thing.
Wow, dude. That's good, West Virginians, though. They're like, you coming on my land, I'm going to take care. Mothman. More like Moth can't.
That's why we have the Second Amendment, so we can shoot cryptids.
Yeah, dude.
For sure.
I love that. I love their first responses. I'm going to shoot it.
Can I kill it? So those are some of the sightings that John Keel had written down. But I think the ultimate question here is, why is it called the Mothman Prophecies, Chris? What was being prophesied?
What's being prophesized?
The Mothman Prophecies. Why the word prophecies?
Because I started, when I was chasing these things, I started getting a lot of mysterious phone calls.
Oh.
And this was, today we have satellites up there that can interfere with any telephone on Earth.
Right.
And in those days, we didn't have those satellites, so I couldn't really blame the government for this. These phone calls were usually very mechanical voices, like you get today from a computer, but we didn't have real PCs in those days either.
Right.
And they predicted a number of things that came true right on the nose.
Like what?
Martin Luther King.
His assassination?
Yes, they told me that he would be shot in the throat. And I took it so seriously, I spent some desperate days trying to contact his group.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Does he have any evidence for those phone calls?
So he did apparently send some letters out to people with these predictions. Most notably, the one of the Sulphur Bridge that collapsed. He did write to someone about it, and he'll talk about that on our next clip.
What?
So a little bit of evidence. And the thing here...
How about the MLK one? Was that letter ever found?
He did not mention any evidence that he actually had tried to reach out to MLK.
No, he just said that.
Well, but I don't know how to find that, I guess is what I should say. Nothing I can personally validate.
You don't have the evidence.
I don't have the evidence is what I should say.
All right.
Yeah. So basically all this is relatively loose. It kind of reminds me of Skinwalker in a way, where weird orbs were being seen. This Mothman creature was being seen. He was getting weird messages to his voicemail with these prophecies, and a lot of people who were saying, like, I'm having these weird dreams now. And then it all culminated in the bridge collapse, and then everything stopped. So he's basically relating this back all to Mothman as kind of like the inciting incident for all of this.
Okay, right. Yeah. It's all interconnected
to
Mothman.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he has a few other predictions that he goes through.
Let's do it, dude. This is the most exciting part.
There were predictions that the Pope was going to be assassinated. And there was an incident where a man dressed as a priest attacked the Pope with a black knife. And fortunately, the Pope's guards subdued this man. But it was a real attempt.
Was this coming, John, at Point Pleasant or following Point Pleasant or what?
This would usually be when I was back in my New York apartment that I'd get these crazy phone calls.
Do you think that it had something to do with Point Pleasant?
It was all interconnected because I was going back and forth to Point Pleasant frequently. But as soon as I would get back from Point Pleasant, I'd have a string of messages, frantic things were happening again in Point Pleasant, so I'd have to jump in my car and go back.
Okay. Does he have a theory on who the mechanical voice is?
In terms of who it is, not necessarily. He doesn't get into that I know of.
Did he think it was the Mothman calling him?
He doesn't mention.
He doesn't even stipulate. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So he is getting these weird messages, and then he also heard a prediction that there would be an accident on the Point Pleasant River.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the predictions that sort of built up over a period of time was that there was going to be a terrible accident on the river, the Ohio River, and that a lot of people were going to be killed. And because the other predictions had come true, I was getting rather frantic about this because I didn't know precisely what was going to happen. There were chemical factories along the river, and I was afraid that one of them was going to blow up. And of course, I couldn't tell the people there. If it didn't happen, I'd look like a fool. And if it did happen, it's even worse.
You'd be implicated or something.
Dude, that was my immediate thought. I was like, did this guy blow up a bridge?
Yeah. He didn't blow up the bridge.
Okay. All right.
There was no he didn't blow up the bridge.
Did this man destroy a bridge in West Virginia?
Yeah, that would be the ultimate crank thing. Is like he blows up the bridge and then blames Mothman.
Yeah.
So
Very
no,
cranky.
he didn't blow up the bridge, but he was getting
Okay,
a lot
got
of
it.
these predictions, and he was starting to freak out about it.
And you say we actually have evidence of the letter he wrote about the bridge falling, or
Uh,
that something bad was going to happen in the area.
he wrote to someone who then later validated it. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I don't have the letter, but someone did say like this guy was concerned about there being an accident on the river.
Right. That is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of weird. And if there is evidence of him reaching out to people like Martin Luther King and these other, the Pope and stuff like that, like what the hell was going on with that?
It's a good question. That's
a weird one, dude.
All very inexplicable. And another inexplicable aspect of this was that the FBI and CIA were in the area for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
Because the FBI and the CIA were around there at that time. I found out later a lot more than I should have known. The TNT area.
Oh, no, that's interesting. So in other words, our own government, our spook side government, knew something was going on there as well and wanted to know what it was?
Because there were suddenly a lot of strangers, and as you know, especially in the 60s, the FBI dressed almost in a uniform. They had very short hair. They always wore a hat, and they dressed with neckties and things that you didn't see in Point Pleasant very often. And
so an FBI agent would tend to stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Yeah, dude, a G-man is going to stick out in West Virginia, dude. Everyone's wearing overalls and coveralls, dude.
That's exactly what he says, was that, there were these men who were like wearing all these slick clothes, and like no one wore that in this town in West Virginia. It's a very
the only people not covered in coal dust.
Yeah. And they were just showing up. So that also led to the theory that Mothman was the result of some sort of government experiment.
Yeah, dude. No doubt, man.
Mm-hmm.
When you start seeing spooks all over the place, get real skeptical.
Yeah, something's going on here.
Something's up here.
Something's going on. There was even a woman that claimed that she saw 2 FBI agents near the bridge the day before it collapsed.
What would have been the reasoning for them to blow up this bridge, though?
John Keel does not know. He is asked that by Art, and he is not really able to give an answer of like why anyone would blow this bridge up.
Right. It's like the because in West Virginia used to be a very unionized state,
mm-hmm.
and radically unionized, violently
mm-hmm.
unionized. I mean, there were actually coal wars between the West Virginia National Guard and union coal miners. Like hundreds of people, I believe, have died over, multiple years between these large pitched battles, like gunfights
mm-hmm.
that were happening between like Pinkerton agents and National Guard agents and union workers. And that's what I'm kind of referring to, that like West Virginia has always been cursed. It really has been.
Yeah, and the only real explanation he's been able to give is that seemingly a lot of the people who died had similar last names to people who had reported sightings of Mothman. That's family members or had seen it themselves, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
So
military, I mean, the U.S. government trying to cover up some loose ends there, huh?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. Yeah. I think that's what he's insinuating.
That's Oswald and the cop and Jack Ruby, right?
Everyone just shooting each other. It's
if everyone's dead, no one can speak.
It's the Spider-Man standoff.
Yeah.
So Mothman's showing up right before this natural disaster. So like, what is the deal with that, right? Like, was he trying to help, or was he a nefarious presence here?
Ooh.
Mothman then might have been, by imparting prophecies with his presence or its presence, whatever it was or is, it might have been trying to warn people that danger, disaster, something horrible was about to happen.
Yes. And people in Point Pleasant started having very strange dreams. Mary Heyer, who was a newspaper reporter, dreamt that there were Christmas packages floating on the river. And the dream really disturbed her, but she couldn't interpret it. And other people were getting the same kind of dreams, that something terrible was going to happen in the town. There was nothing I could do, really.
John, wouldn't there be another way of looking at it, though? That was a half-full glass of water. The half-empty is that Mothman caused this.
Well, he either caused it or he was trying to convey information to us in a strange way.
He's either absolutely benevolent or absolutely nefarious, Art.
No middle ground.
He either caused all the problems or he solved all the problems, Art.
And that's exactly where the Mothman...
We're not sure which. It's like, that's kind of a big deal.
And that's exactly where the Harbinger of Doom theory of Mothman has come into play. So the idea is that anytime something really bad's about to happen, Mothman's going to show up. And that was what happened with the bridge, allegedly. So this silver bridge, which it was called a silver bridge because it was painted with aluminum, so it was actually silver. On December 15th, 1967, it collapsed under the weight of rush hour traffic and 46 people died. So the reason why it collapsed and why I know it wasn't John who blew it up was because they found a small crack in the bridge. Yeah, there was a small crack in the bridge that was about 0.1 inches deep, and the bridge itself had been really poorly maintained. So it just collapsed underneath this rush hour traffic weight.
Right. Wow.
So that's why it went down. And then Mothman had been appearing to warn.
Awful.
Yeah. Now, with that, Chris, Mothman has not only been seen in West Virginia.
He's making his presence known in other states.
Internationally as well.
Internationally?
So in 1999, Russian ufologists claimed that Mothman sightings were being done around Moscow. So people were seeing Mothman in Moscow leading up to the 99 Russian apartment bombings.
What?
Yeah.
Is Mothman a Soviet thing now?
He's all over the place.
So there's more than that. There's more international sightings than just Soviet.
Well, there was this Russian apartment bombing, Chris, and the other big famous sighting was Mothman at 9/11.
Bullshit.
Yes. So here's the clip about Mothman at 9/11. John was not actually aware of this. This was something that Art had brought up to him, but it has been talked about on the internet quite a bit.
There was a picture of a street just about where the 9/11 disaster occurred. Somebody who took a photograph, John. Maybe you've even seen it. Maybe somebody sent it to you. I don't know. Of this bird just having passed, it looks like a building, and it looks like a gigantic pterodactyl. It's the daggonest picture I've ever seen, John.
I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen that?
Huh. This was before the buildings went down?
Actually, it was just after. You can see the dust rising and stuff. And here's this giant... You know, people have said, well, the bird is closer to the camera than you think, but it doesn't look that way to me. It looks like a prehistoric, gigantic bird.
So Mothman being seen at Ground Zero.
Do we have this picture?
We do have this picture, Chris.
Oh, my God. Let me see it.
So as you can see, this is a picture of New York City right after the towers fell. And in the distance, you can see what appears to be a small bird-like creature, and we'll put this in the show notes, that is enlarged here. So, Chris, do you think this is Mothman?
This is inconclusive for me, Paul. It's just so hard to judge exactly where that bird is.
The problem is that the bird is in the sky, and you can't really tell, you know, how close or far it is. It could very well just be a bird.
Yeah, that could just be a bird. Not very moth-like either.
No, and that's the thing about Mothman. So apparently the name Mothman came about because of like the killer moth issues of Batman that were coming out at the time. So people related it to the bad guy in these Batman things, even though it didn't really look like a moth at all. It was more just a winged man.
Right. Yeah, right. All right, got it. Okay. Well, it did look a little bit like a winged man, though.
It does a little bit, yeah. And according to the theories that we've heard so far, this could either be Mothman as the harbinger of something bad that was coming in, like giving us some sort of warning, or he caused 9/11.
Mothman did 9/11.
Mothman did 9/11.
That's the real 9/11. 9/11 truther movement.
That is. You thought it was George Bush.
Mothman did 9/11.
It was Mothman.
No, it was Mothman did 9/11.
So the last clip that we'll have today, Chris, is about phantom photographers that were showing up in the region of Point Pleasant as well. And this one's kind of spooky.
Okay.
Phantom photographers who would drive up and photograph somebody's house and ask to photograph the children. And this is going on in recent years in England, and they call them phantom social workers. But they're very interested in children.
That's
spooky.
That is really spooky. That's really spooky. Do you have any best guess about what they were?
There again, I don't know, because I put out the word to all the police up and down the Ohio Valley to watch out for these guys, and sometimes I would miss them by 10 minutes, and they would disappear somewhere. And eventually, this built up into the Men in Black lore, and they finally made a comedy out of it in the movies. There's another Men in Black movie coming up this year.
Yeah, it's not all comedy, though, believe me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, again, this is what I'm talking about with West Virginia being cursed. I mean, anytime that you have such rampant poverty, the elite power structure is going to exploit that. And so I imagine that there are a lot of predators around West Virginia.
Well, and that's the thing, is that there were just a lot of weird sightings of weird stuff between paranormal phenomena and then actual Men in Black that were being spotted along with FBI and CIA agents, and these people claiming to be social workers. It's just like, just weird stuff kept happening in Point Pleasant, and that's where a lot of this lore came from. That's also why it reminds me of Skinwalker, is because it is a bunch of random things that I don't know how to tie together, but they're all occurring in the same spot.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's just a hub of weird activity. How much of it is real? Mm-hmm. How much is conspiracy? And how much is like in the minds of these folks, and how much of it is legitimately real?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, how much of it is actually happening to these people? It gets really hard to untangle at some point.
And I think one of John Keel's biggest theories for a lot of the stuff that was happening is that he kind of, especially with UFOs, he takes the extraterrestrial hypothesis out of it, and he talks of it more as like a psychic phenomena, where this is something that humans are projecting onto the environment. So we're actually impacting the world around us because we expect to see this thing, or you heard about this thing, and therefore you are actually manifesting it. So he takes kind of like a psychic, like esoteric stance on a lot of
I was going to say a little woo-woo.
Very woo-woo,
yeah. That's an interesting take on the whole thing, the manifestation. I mean, at the end of the day, dude, I go with, this is probably some kind of early government trials, you know, if people are actually seeing like a flying man, like it was like early jet propulsion jetpack testing.
Iron Man. It's an Iron Man situation.
Kind of. Yeah.
It could have been, man. But regardless, it has helped boost the Point Pleasant economy as of late.
Did it really?
Yeah. So the town is now home to a full Mothman museum. Yeah. And they also hold a Mothman festival every year that brings in 10 to 12,000 tourists.
Wow.
And this is a town of 4,000 people right now.
Yeah, dude.
So the town triples in size.
This is insane. Of course, dude. I mean, when you're a town like that, dude, and I mean, it's like winning the lottery, right? I mean, some terrible things have happened to them, but like they have made the most out of tragedy, right?
Yeah. And honestly, this festival sounds really fun. So the festival is held on the third weekend of every September. They have guest speakers to talk about Mothman. They have a bunch of local vendors. They have a pancake eating contest and hayride tours of locally notable areas.
So I'll have, dude, if we actually ever make it big, we're going to have to do it.
Yeah, we need to do it, man. We need to do it.
We're going to bring the podcast along, and y'all can experience the Mothman Festival in this small town in West Virginia.
That would be a ton of fun. Well, Chris, on a scale of 1 to 5 Mothmen, what do you give this story?
I'm going to only give it like a 2, dude. John Keel didn't satisfy my lore needs here. I have way more questions than were even close to being answered.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I'm also going to give it a 2. He doesn't tie it in a bow at all.
No bow. I need somebody to go that next step. You know, there's a lot of whys and a lot of hows that I feel like John Keel wasn't even really directly interested in answering.
Yeah.
It was like, well, the CIA and the FBI were there. What were they doing there? Why? Why are they in West Virginia?
Yeah.
These munition plants are supposedly vacant. What are they doing?
It's a great question. Why were they there?
Why were they there?
Why were they there?
What were they doing here?
What was anything like? Why was anything happening? Honestly, why was the Mothman there?
Well, but see, and that's what I think. I think it is connected to the CIA and the FBI being there. I think the bridge collapse may have something to do with it too.
No,
what were the FBI and CIA doing there?
I don't know, man. I don't know. And John Keel doesn't really know either.
Let me tell you, at the very least, it's nothing good.
What are you talking about?
Good.
The spooks are always nice, I thought.
Nothing good was happening with those people being there. What were they doing? John Keel, you're an investigative journalist. Investigate.
I mean, that's a strong term to apply to John Keel. He was the guy that was looking into the winged cat.
Winged cat man.
God bless him. We love him. Well, that was our Mothman Prophecies episode. We hope you enjoyed it. You can email your thoughts or show requests to c2cpmpod@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. We appreciate you.
All conspiracy, all the time. Later.